Welcome, everybody, to a Second Amendment webinar panel hosted by Trace for Texas. My name is Stephen Colon. I am the moderator on a business called Knucklehead Media Group here in Rockwall, Texas. But I'm excited about having today's panel members. And I want to go around the board and introduce them here. But it's important to have some context behind why we're meeting today and why Trace, Aaron, and CJ are joining us today to have a discussion about the Second Amendment and making this topic front and center to those of you who are locally affected, as opposed to maybe an alternative point of view from what is what is shared on national media. So I'm excited about having today's panelists. I want to go around the board and or go around the horn here and introduce folks. So we have joining us today CJ from the compound in Royce City. CJ, welcome to the panel. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good morning. Good to see you again too.
And then joining us in addition to CJ, we have Mr. Aaron Withrow. Aaron Withrow, among other things, he's an Army medic, a firearms instructor, otherwise known as an expert in these parts at weapons handling. Aaron, welcome to the panel. How are you today?
Hey, doing great, and thanks for having me on. Something I'm very passionate about, and I'm excited to get started.
And last but certainly not least, Mr. Hanussen, very nice that you would take some time this morning to join us. Trace, congressional candidate for the Texas Congressional District 4. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Stephen. Thanks so much for doing this. And just by way of introduction, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tracy Hanussen, and I am running for the Republican nomination to replace new Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, on the general election ballot this November. I'm a limited government conservative, husband, father, fourth generation U.S. Marine, and Texas Aggie. And I'm looking for your vote on August 8th for the precinct chairs to replace him on the ballot. And I thought this would be a great forum to engage Northeast Texas on a subject that a lot of us probably care a lot about. I view this as being the first of several discussions. And in this world, the post-COVID world, or the COVID world that we're currently in, this format is becoming a lot more familiar to folks. And it's probably a good way to reach out. So I encourage everyone to send in your questions and comments. We're looking for questions about today's topic, but also what else should we be talking about together in Northeast Texas and Congressional District 4 going forward. Looking forward to hearing from anyone about that.
That's a really good point. It's important to call that out here. So today, as you're listening to the live stream, there's going to be topics and things that are discussed from each one of these subject matter experts. My encouragement to you is to leave a comment. If you're watching this on social media, this is going to be streamed across multiple channels. So specifically as it relates to the Second Amendment, there's probably a personal story. There's probably an experience that you had, and these individuals here that are going to be talking and sharing. Don't be afraid to leave a comment, maybe even provide some commentary to some of the points that they make. And it's going to be an active discussion. So we'll call you out. If you have a question, we will get to you. So with that being said, I have a question for the panel, and I really want Trace to maybe kick this off. And that is, why, Trace, is the Second Amendment important and critical to the District 4 here that we have here in Texas?
Look, I think that's the crux of the discussion. You have to think about the demographic makeup of those of us in Northeast Texas, right? We're somewhat rural. We're Texans. We got a little bit of, frontier pioneer spirit. We're not like living in a high density city like New York or San Francisco, right? That's not what our lives are like. We've grown up experiencing a lot of freedom, and we enjoyed the freedom to hunt, to shoot guns, to protect our families. And I think, speaking for myself, and I think I speak for a lot of folks in the district, we don't particularly believe that an East Coast elite person is going to understand how best to govern us here in Northeast Texas.
That's a really good point. And CJ, I kind of want to pose this question to you because your background comes from law enforcement in various levels. So it runs the gamut all the way down to local law enforcement, all the way up to the national level. What I want to do is ask you, based off of what Trace had just said, how important is it to have differences in terms of the geographical areas and how that's relative to the population of the folks that live here?
We here in Central Texas have the ability to do a lot more things with firearms than most large cities. Being born and grew up in New York City, guns were non-existent. Two sets of people had guns, law enforcement and the bad guys. We have the ability to have the right to own our guns for hunting purposes, for sporting purposes, and for self-defense in our homes. So having seen all three of those and having carried a firearm legally for over 38 years, starting off with the military, local law enforcement, and then finishing up on a federal level, it's something that I've accustomed to every day, but not everyone in this country has the ability to do so or to speak to that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So even given that background, Aaron, and I think it would be important for you to add some really some context here about the importance of firearm safety as it relates to this particular district, because what CJ just brought up is not everybody is going to be as familiar with the different types of weapons and the firearms that are there. So it's interesting, based off of your experience providing instructions to safely handle weapons. What is your central core message to those folks who may not necessarily be, honestly, they may be new to gun ownership, or they may be even new to this topic?
So it comes down to this, and I'm not trying to be flippant and funny, but would you give a Porsche to a 16-year-old and then never let them drive it again? That is the core principle to my gun ownership. So many people feel that the license to carry or that gun ownership is a one-time and done, that you can come out to the range, learn to not point the barrel at somebody, keep your finger off the trigger, and then basically you're a competent shooter or gun owner. Same thing. You can't throw the keys to the Porsche to a 16-year-old, show them how to turn it on, and say, go ahead and park it in the garage till you need it.
Yeah, that's a really
silly.
So, yeah, it's a great analogy.
Yeah, constant reinforcement. And so you hit on one of my main goals. It's safety, safety, safety. And I can tell you there are people that graduate basic training across the military that they're not competent yet for firearm use to carry every day. I see Jay shaking his head. CJ and I agree on this point. You can never have enough practice with the most deadly tool.
Well,
if it's not safe, we can't do it.
That's absolutely
the human that's operating.
That's true. Barbara, hello. How are you? We've got a comment here from Miss Barbara Darrow. It's nice that you're here. Thank you very much for joining us. And Trace, you kicked off this particular topic, and I think that CJ and Aaron are hovering over maybe some central themes behind the differences of the makeup of this particular district. I'm curious, when you made reference to coastal folks deciding policy for folks that live here in this particular district, I think it's important to lean into the fact that we are a more rural area, and so we have our own set of problems. Would you agree or disagree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, this is a rural part of the state. When you think about, I use this analogy quite a bit. When you think about the great state of Texas, okay, we're the size of 3 United Kingdoms from a landmass area. We've got 30 million people. And all the way out in West Texas, you got Loving County, population 102. It is the second least densely populated county in the United States. Now, contrast that, go down south to the Bay, and you've got Harris County, where Houston is. That's 4.5 million people. Okay, if just in our one state we've got that kind of diverse array of demographics, then why would we try and apply the same rule across that entire area? It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? In Northeast Texas, we're also fairly rural, right? And we can talk to Aaron about what that might look like as a resident of Hunt County. But we don't have like big city stuff going on here. Like we don't have a lot of homeless on the street like they might have in Travis County and Austin. We don't have people living on top of each other in high rises for the most part in Northeast Texas, right? People are a lot more spread out. Does that mean we don't have problems? No, it doesn't. We have different kinds of problems, okay? We might have some issues with drug use. We might have some issues with theft out in the country. We might have a different kind of issue altogether. It's not even crime, maybe it's wildlife related. I mean, Aaron, you want to talk about what it's like in Hunt County in that regard?
Sure. Yeah, no, and it kind of goes to your point when you're talking about the coastal elites telling us what to do. It's a two-way street. I'm not trying to tell y'all what to do. I'm not trying to tell the Pacific Northwest, how they should be logging and how they're erosion controlled. That's not my area. That's not my town. That's not where I live. Therefore, I don't want that municipal being affected by my decisions. Same thing out here in Hunt County. We've got 3 types of varmints that are year-round needing to be eliminated because they are a detriment to the environment, and that's hog, nutria, and coyote. Those are ready to be taken down at any time. They breed faster than we can control them. So those are our issues that we face in the northeast portion of Texas. And how are you, an urban dweller of New York City, or a Pacific Coast person, supposed to make legislation and government rights to my gun control to really affect my local population? Power should flow from the municipal up. There's supposed to be certain checks and balances that I have to run and establish my family, my life, my city the way I see fit, and vote locally to make sure that my voice is heard from the local level up. That's
an interesting point, Aaron. And CJ, I really would like you to add some perspective here as it relates to the responsibility of gun ownership, given the local impact of those problems that Trace pointed out. Right. I mean, Aaron added some color with the animals and the varmints and the particular. That's not necessarily going to be a city or urban issue, right? So how does responsible gun ownership actually spill over into some of those other local specific issues that Trace had alluded to a little bit earlier?
Well, as we talked about from the very, very beginning there, safety, safety, safety. As the owner of a tactical training facility, John Q. Public either calls on the phone or walks through the door. The first thing that we instill in them is safety, because once that firearm goes off, it's going to hit its target. Depends on what target is. So the mindset of most people walking through that door is protection of self. They want to be able to protect themselves from whatever may confront them. They want to be able to save families. That's their biggest commodity, is taking care of their families. And then the third option that we offer them ideally is protection of anyone else. I'm not talking about vigilantes. I'm not talking about jumping out there and, well, I'm the police now. No, the police have that mantra to take care of us, but giving the individual ability to take care of someone else, let's say they're in their home and someone's getting attacked on the street right in front of their home. Police, I love them. I've been in law enforcement for 30 something plus years. But we can't be everywhere at all times. So it's giving them the ability to take care of self first, your family, and others if you choose.
Well, CJ, you just hovered over something that's very unique to all rural areas, not necessarily just this particular district. And Trace, you could probably add some perspective here as it relates to those individuals who take it upon themselves to not necessarily be an extension of the police, but they believe that they should protect their own property, right? And they have a uniqueness to their local area that they believe, that they understand that there's a lag time between maybe something going wrong or a call into the police because of law enforcement's presence to be needed. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be there right away. And so there is a sense of responsibility that's unique to our area, as opposed to maybe an urban area where there's a little bit quicker dispatch, so to speak, a quicker dispatch time. So I'm interested when it comes to those uniqueness. CJ, it sounds like you want to say something here.
Yeah, and the thing about it is these rural areas that we live in, luckily here in Rockwall, we have a police department and a sheriff department that if a call goes out, they're normally there in about 30 seconds, less than a minute. Rural areas, you have one deputy that's responsible for one specific area. If he's on the east side of that jurisdiction, on the west side, it's going to take a lot longer than 30 seconds to a minute to get there. So that's the kind of mindset where people should have the mindset of, hey, I need to take care of myself, but their property, they have a right to take care of their property. And crime, we don't have it too bad per se, but it's still prevalent here. It's here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing some comments coming in through the live feed here. My encouragement to you is you're watching this on a social media channel. You have a question for a congressional candidate. My suggestion is ask it. And Trace, we have a question here. Can you speak to an understanding of something called the Castle Law? Is that a specific law that you can provide some perspective to?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm not an attorney, but thanks, Mike Rannigan, for asking that question. I believe what he's referring to is like the Castle Doctrine. And in the state of Texas, we have the right, as we should, the God-given right to protect our family and our property. So if someone comes in your home or your castle, and you have to use deadly force to defend yourself or your family or protect your property, that is justified in the state of Texas. Now let's contrast that with other countries. I'm not sure what other states their laws are like, but for example, I know in England there have been occasions, and even Australia, where there'd be a farmer who owned a shotgun. Somebody broke in their house, was trying to attack their family. They shot that person, and the farmer went to prison. Like, I can't, again, being born in the US and born in the South, I can't wrap my mind around that mentality that the criminal is not the one who's in trouble. It's the man defending his family that's the one in trouble. So, yeah, the Castle Doctrine basically says that you can protect your house, and it gives a lot of latitude. That doesn't mean I encourage folks to kill other people if you don't need to, because, oh, by the way, that could come with a hefty lawsuit, but you absolutely have the right in this state to protect your home and your property. And that's what the Castle Doctrine refers to. Aaron, you want to talk about that, it sounds like.
No, I'm just going to caveat onto you. Look, it's a simple, common fact. When the enemy's looking in on your fob, looking in on your base, whether it was the Taliban, Al Qaeda, whatever, two combatants, it's a simple fact. You look in, you see soldiers geared up, armored up, weapons at the ready, situationally aware. That's called a strong target. You look in and you see a bunch of dudes with their tops off because it's hot, and their armor's laying over to the side, and maybe their rifle's not even with it. That's a soft target. Hard target means you're not going to be the one that's attacked. And I firmly live by that, especially as a Second Amendment person. No, you step onto my property, you play stupid games, you're going to win stupid prizes. So I'm sorry, that's just it. And so when we start getting too soft, how we treat it, and start really dipping into people's right to bear arms, especially in my property, you're creating me as a soft target.
CJ, it looked like you had wanted to add some perspective there. Go ahead.
Carry in Texas, we're licensed by DPS. The Castle Doctrine is your home, the physical perimeter of your home, not the property outside, that front door, that back doors. Once somebody breaks that threshold and steps into the house, you have a right to protect yourself. Ideally, what it teaches you shoot to stop the threat. If the threat or shooting to stop the threat results in the death of that person, so be it. You have a right to defend yourself inside that home. So anyone making entrance inside that home, there you go. On property, the mindset is, okay, if the person's on my property and are not right here in my face threatening myself or my family, you have a right to defend your property, but that's where the mentality is. You have to think of what happened after the fact. So once again, in the confines of the four corners of that house, someone coming in has no right to be there. Castle Doctrine, defend your family.
Yeah, that's a really it's important to draw the distinction as to where it's coming from. That's why context matters, which is, I think, is what Trace's original point was. Him not being an attorney, but wanting to provide an interpretation of how the law is meant to be written in the application of it, specifically to this district. Kelly Brown, Trace wants to let you know that they wholeheartedly support you from the great state of Texas, or excuse me, the great state of Florida. Yeah. And there's a couple other quotes here. Terry Garrett states, no one should transfer or have their individual security legislated away from their personal protection. So there's this overarching theme that's coming back here, where individual responsibility is continuing to come up and be surfaced in terms of not just the comments, but also just the commentary here provided by this panel. And so, Trace, I'm interested when it comes to the values or the belief systems of of this particular district. How important do you believe that a representative narrative from this particular district be taken to a place like Washington, D.C., and how does that fuel you in this mission to be a representative of this particular area?
You're hitting on the very, very core of this part of the government, which is the House of Representatives, also known as the People's House, a government of the people. Like, that's the specific job that I would do. Is I would take the values and the desires of this district, Industrial District 4 in Northeast Texas, and take those to Washington and fight for those values. Because what we don't want, right? This is a very conservative district. You mentioned it, Stephen. There's a lot of individual responsibility here. Most conservatives are big on individual responsibility and don't want to be told what to do. We want to continue those values in Washington and represent this district as a conservative, individually responsible set of Americans and Texans. And we don't need a big government telling us what to do. Look, let's take our small town values to DC. That's the whole crux of it. It's the people's house, y'all.
So, Aaron, absolutely, Trace, and that's a very good point. And we're getting commentary to provide some perspective. That was Sheriff Terry Garrett. So, thank you for the correction from the correction there, guys. I'll do push-ups later. Aaron, the specific statistics that you had wanted to cite a little bit earlier about looking at gun ownership as a tool. So, a weapon is essentially a means to an end. So the interpretation of violence, the violent statistics, there you can insert whatever tool there is, and it doesn't take from the gravity of those particular statistics. So I want to pose this question to you in terms of Texas values and small town values. You don't hear a whole lot of problems about scissors being a problem or knives being an issue. So can you add some color there to that?
Oh, yeah, I can add all the color you want to. And I think that we can all agree on this. And it's not just small town values. It's just we hold it more dear, in my opinion. And that is the internal belief that I want to earn what I want or I want to take it from somebody else. And so when you have that moral decision, when you will be a protector and a defender and an upright moral person, or you take what you want, regardless of the consequences. Like you said, insert any tool you want to, be it a chainsaw, be it a pair of scissors. Plenty of circumstances with, same thing with cars. Cars is a deadly weapon. Insert tool, but at the basis of it, you still have a moral decision. Do I want to earn what I want? Do I want to take it from somebody else? And that's where that gun violence comes from. It's, in my opinion, an inappropriate response. It's not gun violence, it's violence. It is, I've decided to take from somebody else instead of to earn what I want to earn. And so,
well, I think that
I want to get down to chainsaw violence. Okay?
Yeah,
chainsaw violence. It's a big deal.
Well, CJ, it's important just from a law enforcement perspective to categorize things so you can make sense of how to best strategize and prevent them. So there's some context there that matters. But from your perspective, when you look at this particular district and you look at what you want represented in Washington, D.C., from a law enforcement perspective, how do you balance the priorities of the people and also the effectiveness of the legislation that would be proposed?
It boils down to equal protection of all under the law. That's the bottom line. You take care of your people within your jurisdiction, within your area, within your police boundaries, but you administer everyone the same way. That's that equality. Having spent time in a military uniform, in a police uniform, and in plain clothes, the mindset was, I'm going to treat you with common courtesy and respect across the board. It's irrelevant what you did or what you didn't do, but everybody's going to be treated the same way. And it comes down to the rule of law. The rule of law is something that we all need to follow, irrelevant of who we are, what we look like, what our religious background, whatever. We live together as one cohesive group, and that's what matters the most.
Trace, and thank you for that perspective, CJ. When you talk about the equal protection for all under the law, Trace, there's an extension of what Congressman Radcliffe the thought process of wanting to provide that type of input that's representative of the people who live in this particular district in DC. Can you talk a little bit about when you feel the call to lead and the call to serve, how does that tie into giving power to that particular voice and helping the folks that live in this district actually have that voice? I'm interested in what your perspective is here.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned like what at the time Congressman Ratcliffe did. He did a great job of representing small town values. Look, he was a mayor of a small town here in the county called Heath, and so he took those values to DC and gave us in the district a voice. In other words, he encapsulated what we stand for. Again, going back to, he took our small town values and took those to DC and said, this is what my district wants and needs. Okay. When it comes down to any sort of decisions around, here's a good decision for today, or in today's day and time, we have a tremendous amount of dependency on China, which is, by the way, a topic for a whole other conversation. We have a tremendous amount of dependency on China for manufacturing, which is largely rooted in part based on cost and profit motive, and probably a little bit less on American pride and the need for jobs here in the US. Okay. We are now starting to feel the effects of that. And our district here in Northeast Texas has a bunch of manufacturing, or had at one time even more manufacturing jobs than we have today. And I think what would be an appropriate way to take what we need and want in our district, which is jobs and just the American way and the rights to life, liberty, and property, would be to go to DC and start figuring out ways we can unwind the manufacturing that's happening overseas, especially in communist-controlled China, and bring those back to Northeast Texas. So that's a perfect embodiment of taking the voice of a district to DC and trying to influence decisions or come up with a plan that tapers down manufacturing and brings it back to Northeast Texas. And that's just one example. Obviously, with the gun example too, of limiting any kind of restrictions whatsoever and removing restrictions on the Second Amendment, as per today's conversation. But those are just good examples of.
That's exactly what I was gonna essentially point out in terms of today's topic. There's so many other issues that are specific to this particular district that we could service and probably have more than just a 30-minute dialogue with questions coming in from folks. Let's land this particular topic on this question. And I want to go around the panel here, and potentially we could, with 60 seconds each. This comes from Mike Rannigan. And his question is, what are the current issues in respect to wanting to take our Second Amendment away? And then also, what can we do as citizens to keep our rights? There was an answer almost to this right after it was asked, and it was the importance of voting, which is why we have a congressional candidate on here talking about this particular topic. But I want to pose that question to the panel here. What are the current issues in respect to wanting to take it away? And then what can we do as citizens to keep our rights? CJ?
I smile. Having spent some time and lived in California and transferring from there to my final resting place here in Texas. Thank God for Texas. Amen. I don't foresee that as a problem here in Texas, although there are some who will say that oh, guns. Guns don't hurt people. People with guns hurt people. As long as you're a law-abiding citizen, follow the laws as they are, and you do the right thing, you have no issues. This talking about what we do to keep our rights, it's voting. It's keeping the people in here who are going to maintain our rights as citizens to bear arms. As you know, Second Amendment, United States Constitution, gives us that right. But not only does the right come with being afforded to us by the Constitution, it's common courtesy and common sense. You got to do the right thing all the time, every time with that gun to maintain those rights.
And I'll be super fast. I'm going to back up CJ 100% on that. If you open the door to start playing with Second Amendment rights, you open the door to get some silly in there. You start wanting to serialize individual rounds. That would take the price of a 9mm from 20 cents a round to $2 a round. Now you make it cost inaffordable. So you have these things that sound common sense like, But as soon as you start making any type of adjustments to my Second Amendment rights, you have the people that are going to do the right thing, and then you're going to have the people that are going to start taking it away from me. You're opening the door to a very slippery slope. So I say you leave it as is. And like CJ said, start adjusting how we deal with people, not with how we deal with tools. Hashtag chainsaw violence.
Hey, I'm going
Trace.
to bring around the horn and wrap it up
Yep.
because people are donating their lunch breaks to this, which I really appreciate. Mike Green said it best. The biggest thing we can do is vote. Get out there and vote. Okay.
100%.
What's happening in America is there is some obfuscation or confusion as to the root causes of violence. Somehow there's a perception that a tool or an inanimate object causes violence, which we know is not true. So we need to agree on what the goal is as a society. Is the goal to reduce violence, or is the goal to get rid of guns? Because those two things are not the same thing. I would propose that the goal is to get rid of violence. And so I would take my business mind and do a root cause analyses and figure out ways to get those. But getting out and voting is the best way to prevent folks who don't represent our district here to impacting our lives here in the district. And that being said, as I said at the beginning, I would appreciate y'all's vote here in Northeast Texas Congressional District 4. Look, I'm a limited government conservative. I'm not a lawyer. I haven't been trying to be a politician for 10 years. I'm just trying to help, okay? I feel humbled and blessed to be endorsed by the highest ranking Republican in the Texas Senate, Senator Jane Nelson. And I've been endorsed by the Dean of the House, the longest serving member in US Congress, Don Young. It's humbling to me. I've got some ideas, including the Second Amendment. We need to refocus and retool our military. All right, we need to focus on Asia. I mentioned China earlier. We need to tell students there are other options besides a 4-year degree so we can avoid that student debt bubble bursting, which is going to impact our economy. And speaking of the economy, we've got to get our spending corralled by applying good business practices and saving money and reducing waste. I hope I can count on the district's vote on August 8th. I'm like, in the meantime, let's continue dialogues like this. Reach out and give me a call. Let's have a conversation. My job is to listen. My job is to represent the district. And I can't do that if I'm running my mouth and talking. I need to listen and I need to understand where y'all are coming from. Reach out. Let's talk. Let's have meet and greets. Let's get the government out of our hair. Let's take Texas small town values to DC. Let's give citizens their rights and freedoms back. And let's get our people back to work. Like,
Absolutely.
we're in uncharted waters here, y'all. Stay in the course and do what we've always done. It ain't working. Let's not kid ourselves, okay? We've got to avoid recession, and let's send somebody to DC who's going to represent our values. And that's all I'm going to say. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great place to land the plane. Thank you to all the panelists and all the comments. Trace, it sounds like you have some fodder for some other topics here very, 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 very soon, especially judging from the comments.
Let me know, y'all. Put them in the comments. Thanks so much.
Good job,
Have a
guys.
great day, y'all.
You bet.